Now comes gentle treatment, the ultimate relaxer.
The relaxer called gentle treatment.
The first no-lie relaxer that conditions while relaxing. Contains
Welcome
no
to Shore
polyhydroxide
Signs, where we
or
explore
methoxstain.
the coastal North Carolina region's past, present, and future to promote community resilience. We hear from our guests who share their insights into the challenges faced by our region, seeking potential solutions to help coastal North Carolina thrive. Today, we speak with journalist Linda Villarosa about her New York Times Magazine article, The Disturbing Truth About Hair Relaxers. Thanks for joining us, Linda.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Well, let's get straight into it. First, I grew up certainly around folks who were using a lot of hair relaxers. And so I've got a little history with that. But I wanted to ask, can you tell us about your personal experiences with hair relaxers growing up?
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you. My grandmother, when I was growing up, was a beautician, and she was trained at Miss Lydia's beauty college in Chicago to shampoo, press, and curl. So we all had lined up in her kitchen when I was growing up and had our hair straightened using heat. So I did not grow up using relaxers. However, as an adult, was trying to look like DeBarge or I don't know, some kind of Michael Jackson thing or some kind of curly, and had a relaxer gone wrong where I didn't lose my hair, but it was so straight as to be like insane looking. And I had to wear bandanas and scarves for a long time. So that was basically my only brush. And I never did it again because I realized my friend and I, who were scheming together, didn't know how to do it right and left it alone.
Yeah, and I'll say that as a teenager, I tried hair relaxers even a couple of times. You know, the sort of ones that were supposed to give me instant waves. And if anyone who grew up in the African American community, or as many who grew up in the African American community know, if you have short hair and you have these kind of little crinkles going, that's supposed to be very appealing. A couple of times I tried S-curl in order to get that look, but it just didn't take for me either. What surprised you when you started digging into the research on hair relaxers as they relate to health risks?
Well, I think I didn't know so much about this. I was one of the many people who in 2022 saw the study that came out of the National Institutes of Health that associated the chemicals in hair straightener products with uterine cancer. And the research, the association, and that research was very strong. It was a lot of people in the study. It was a government study. Hundreds of media outlets picked it up. I wanted to be very cautious in order to report fairly and not scare people. So it took me a year to really dig deep into this. And I think what was most surprising was how far back the research went. So in the 90s, there were scientists, including two I interviewed, who were looking at this. And one of them was very young. The other one was just like, wait, why are Black hair products containing hormones, and why are children developing early puberty after they use these products? And so I think I was just surprised at how long it's been going on. One of the things I did to sort of understand better is to say, how long did it take us to get labels on cigarettes? Like a century. So I understand that science moves slowly, and epidemiology moves slowly, but I also understand that when it comes to the health of Black people, especially Black women, that really moves slowly because there's not as much interest.
And so you've got almost a systemic problem wrapped within a systemic problem, like a lack of concern and visibility when it comes to Black women and health, and then also this kind of churning sort of business interests in these hair relaxers, despite there being some, at least, now apparent health risks connected to them.
And I think part of it is a lack of regulation.
Mm-hmm.
So in our country, our products, cosmetics, are regulated by the Food and Drug Administration, not the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Administration.
Yeah.
It's the FDA.
Mm-hmm.
And so they aren't as interested in regulating, restricting, or banning chemicals in cosmetics. In our country, we restrict or ban 9 chemicals in cosmetics, and in the European Union, it's 1,300. So there's clearly a more of a business interest than there is in a health, science, and regulatory interest.
And you mentioned that you had gone into a year-long process figuring out, how to answer these questions you had about hair relaxers. And then part of that journey was talking to Black women who were also scientists who were also looking into the same question or set of questions. What were some of their experiences like?
Well, what I do when I interview an expert, so a scientist, a doctor, whoever it is, I always ask how they got into the work, because I think that's an important origin question to help me understand their work. And 100% of the women I interviewed for this story, including a lawyer and some other people that weren't even investigators, maybe they were activists, said that their lived experience included having their hair relaxed as children. And I think children having these strong chemicals on their heads consistently, especially when they cause burns, abrasions, and scabs, which provides a convenient and efficient entryway of the chemicals into the body. And then over time, if you're a kid, then that turns into a buildup of toxins in your system, which could trigger early puberty. So each of those women told me about in detail wherever they lived, talked about being in either in their kitchen or in a hair salon getting their hair relaxed with great excitement, because every people relax their hair in the community, people relax their hair in the church, people relax their hair on television, their favorite musicians had relaxed hair. So this was just a kind of a Black girl rite of passage.
Could you talk a little about the relationship between hair relaxers, cancer risks, and the chemicals involved? You mentioned just now that these chemicals can bring on early puberty. But then even if you're an adult, there are some other impacts, correct?
So there are a whole bunch of different ways that this works. One is some products contain hormones, and they say something on it that says maybe contains hormones as a positive, and Black products are more likely to contain either hormones or endocrine disruptors. Endocrine disruptors act or change what happens to your body as far as hormones. So that's a problem. So endocrine disruptors and or hormones themselves can throw the body when you're younger into early puberty. Early puberty is associated with several different kinds of reproductive cancers. Uterine, ovarian, and breast cancer are the most common, and also uterine fibroids. So fibroids aren't a kind of cancer, but they are the number one reason to get a hysterectomy, and they're much more common in Black women. So this is something that is usually not deadly, but it is very taxing to the body and hard for women in general, but Black women especially, to manage. So if you're using these products that enter through your scalp, then change the hormones in your body, and then have been associated with these 3 ovarian, breast, and uterine cancer, then that is something that's scary, but it's also something that's avoidable. And so that is the part I am interested in, is how can we lower this risk of, having these hormones and these chemicals in our bodies?
Sure, and I'd like to know how we do that. Before that, let me just circle back and get a little bit of more clarity. Is it that there is a an exposure to these chemicals early on, these hormones early on, which starts a chain reaction that then has a health impact? Or is it that they are, even if you come to use, say, some of these endocrines as an adult, you are still at risk?
I would say that I think number one is the scary sort of use of them beginning in childhood and using them every couple of months throughout your adulthood. So that's probably the worst. The second is even if you didn't use the products as a kid, but then you use them consistently and you suffered from burns and abrasions and things like that, it's still associated with this endocrine disruption. So, but I think the worst is what happens as children. And I remember one of the quotes from the scientists who said, if our mothers knew this about, relaxing our hair as children, they never would have done it. So I think it's both.
And okay, and now let's go back to you were sort of giving us a vision of one way or several ways we can start to think about and confront this problem.
Well, I think part of the solution is solving another problem, which is discrimination around our hair. So there is this feeling or mandate, even in the United States, especially, that Black women straighten our hair. So that's why you see people in politics with straightened hair. We don't know if they're using a relaxer necessarily or they're using heat. There's people on television, the anchors, Black women have straightened hair. People in corporate America, but especially people in the military, there's a mandate that you have neat hair. And if you have a certain kind of texture hair, it's going to be easier and often cheaper to use a relaxer because straightening your hair with heat, which is certainly an option, also can go back as soon as you get it wet. So if you sweat, if you go swimming, if you get caught in the rain, your hair will go back to its natural way if it's only straightened with heat. So I think that's why we have the Crown Act, which is not a national law, but it's certainly a mandated in 20 something states that says you cannot discriminate against people because of their hair. So first is solving the problem that straight hair is an expectation in many jobs and in many careers. The other thing is, even in the midst of a natural hair movement, which is lovely, we still have this pressure to have straightened hair. And often the easiest way to achieve it, is through relaxing it, using a hair straightener product.
And then could you put that in a historical context for us? Like when you say that straight hair is usually perceived as being neater, what are some of the cultural, historical forces at work there?
I think I traced it back. It probably goes back further, but I like to think of it as when Black people came up from the South during the Great Migration. And remember, so many people came up to cities where they were working mostly in white homes. So there was this idea that you wanted to be more professional, less, I'm using quotes, country. If you're going in to clean the white people, be the housekeeper, take care of the children in the white homes in the North. So having straightened hair was one way you could look more acceptable, and you could honestly have your hair look more like their hair. So that began this mandate or this idea that you needed to have straightened hair, however you achieved it. And at that, then it was mostly not through relaxers, it was through heat. Then the relaxer was invented and became this convenient way to keep this up. We're still, this is the 40s and 50s, and we're still talking about, before the civil rights movement, where we didn't have as much power and we were trying to be as respectable, again in quotes, and neat and professional as we could. So in my family, we straightened our hair with heat until the Black Power movement of the 70s.
This brother here, myself, all of us were born with our hair like this, and we just wear it like this because it's natural, because the reason for it, you might say, is like a new awareness among black people that their own natural appearance, physical appearance is beautiful and it's pleasing to them.
And that became sort of the nascent beginning of the natural hair movement. And black is beautiful. And we have big afros, and my grandmother was really mad. Get that mess off of your heads. You will never get a job. You're going to ruin your professional prospects, because that was the old school idea. And even though it's old school, it still exists in some ways.
Yeah, and I'll just add that as someone who had dreads, I dreaded my hair when I was in high school. That was in the 90s. Initially, it was not received well. There are these standards that are like part of any community, and black hair aesthetics can be something people have really strong opinions on.
I agree with you. I also had locks. And even when I was working in the newsroom of the New York Times, I had them, and nice, always very neat, always tied back, nothing too wild. And I loved them. But, now I have braids and another nice, neat hairstyle. But now it's more for my personal ease than it is for society's demands.
There is this kind of opportunity, of course, that comes up with the styling of black hair and how it can support black-owned businesses and wealth because of the specificity of the service being provided and the knowledge you need in order to do it. So, like, in a way, it's been this nice kind of insulated industry that was feeding wealth and power back into the black community. So, in a lot of ways, when you start to challenge or get people to think about a long-standing practice like relaxing hair, it can influence, be critical for like this kind of long-standing institution, let's call it. So I don't know if you've thought much about, what the potential impact industry-wise might be of having to make this shift.
Well, the thing I know best, I worked at Essence off and on for 12 years. So I know a lot about hair and hair care. And what I do know is that Black people, especially Black entrepreneurs, which both my mother and grandmother were entrepreneurs, and know how to shift. So if people are relaxing their hair less, which unarguably is happening, relaxing the hair less, then as entrepreneurs, we can shift to natural hair products. We can shift to figuring out other ways to, style our hair, and products that we can sell to each other in our community. So this is less about opportunity cost and more about opportunity shift. And I think you've seen that a lot I live in Brooklyn, so there's so many natural hair, that like outside the salon, it says we specialize in natural hair. And I think that's a beautiful change. But, I also was talking to a woman who straightened her hair and using chemicals. And she was saying it's so hard when you have children too, and you have a whole bunch of heads, and it's hard to to keep their hair managed. And I sympathized with that. I think that one of the solutions is to use the product safely and carefully. If the entryway is through burns and abrasions, be a bit more cautious to avoid that, as well as straightening the hair less often, so you're not, having less access to the chemicals, using heat to do it, even though it's a pain and, when it rains. And then also figuring out, Black women are super creative. We have worn our hair in every style. You can think of, whoever you want to think of. You can start with someone who is completely and beautifully bald. You can think about Patti LaBelle in all her hair iterations. You can think of Beyonce, whoever it is. We know how to look fantastic no matter how we style our hair. India Irie, Solange. So, we can be creative and just love our hair however we're wearing it.
Mm-hmm. And just out of curiosity, you've mentioned a few times using heat to straighten hair. And if you could describe that process a little bit, and also talk a little bit about, what you think of it. Like, is it a viable option, or is it a preferred option? Are there any kinds of effects, even of that kind of, I guess, heat-based relaxing that people should look out for?
So when you're using heat, you're straightening the hair using a hot comb. So when I was growing up, my grandmother had the old school iron comb. She'd turn on the gas stove and put it right on, and it turned bright red, and then it was really hot. My sister and I were just reminiscing about having our grandmother had shaky hands, so we have little burns. um, we're like, "What's wrong with you?" It's like, "Oh, grandma was straightening the hair." Certainly that is an option. It's time consuming. If every time you wash, you have to go through it again. Every time you go swimming, you have to go through it again. When it rains, and if you can't cover your hair fast enough, you have to go through it again. Some people use hot combs. Some people use flat irons to straighten the hair. People go to salons and get it done, and it's very viable. A lot of women who you see are not using chemical relaxers, they're using heat. I go to a salon uptown in Harlem, and where I get my hair braided, and there are women getting relaxers. There are also people having their hair straightened with heat. So everything, in our salon, it's multifactorial, and it's great to see all that, although I would like to see less relaxer use given what I know now.
Yeah, that's great. And it brings back, again, memories for me. As someone who's cisgender male, I didn't grow up having my hair straightened with the hot comb, as it was called. But, I was always fascinated by it. And my grandmother used one as well on my cousins. And, often when she did, I was around, just kind of because of just the process was just kind of fascinating. So yeah, all right. Well, so in terms of the picture of the solution, there are the things that need to happen in terms of regulation, and then there are kind of like the personal choices that people get to make. Like, where do you see, hopefully, the kind of public discussion going from here?
I think the most important discussion that needs to be had is about regulation. When I was interviewing Dr. Tamara James Todd, who is a pioneer in this area, she was the centerpiece of my story. It was in October. The FDA had proposed a ban on formaldehyde. Certainly, formaldehyde should not be in cosmetics. Formaldehyde is carcinogenic. It's on the FDA website as, a carcinogen. So that was still in hair products and other cosmetics. So there was happy day, yay! The FDA is doing something; they're banning. But by the time I was closing the story and finishing it up in April, the FDA had missed its own deadline to do the ban, to put the ban into effect. So the FDA needs more pressure I mean, 9 versus 1,300 in the EU of restricting chemicals or banning them. Something's wrong there. So we need to put pressure. And after my story came out, there was a letter from a comment on the New York Times website from a medical examiner. He said, I use formaldehyde in my work. I would never put that on any other part of my body. So if there is formaldehyde in some hair straighteners still, that needs to be banned. Oh, that alone, that is very easy. Then some have said that the best way to think about it is to put a warning label on hair straightener products, just to say what the chemicals are. And part of the problem is in a 2018 study, when you looked at the label versus testing the products to see what chemicals are in them, most of the chemicals were not listed on the label. Not that as consumers we would actually know what they were, because all the names are like super long and complicated, but still you would expect to have better labeling. But if the regulations are so lax that they don't even have to be honest about what's on the label, again, something is wrong with this industry and this picture.
So you not only have to worry about the fact that these chemicals or these products are relatively unregulated, but that they are often unknown. Like, you could be using a hair relaxer that has formaldehyde in it and not know it.
That's right. And you asked what surprised me.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I did not know that some products still have actual hormones in them. I did not know that some products have formaldehyde in them. So I didn't know those two things, because those are, you should not be putting hormones in your body through your scalp on a regular basis. And you definitely should not be putting formaldehyde, letting that enter your body. So I didn't know that. I thought, aren't those banned? And then once I heard about how few chemicals are banned for cosmetic use in the United States, I started to understand this better.
Sure, and I would add to that many of the pharmaceuticals that can change our hormones, that can alter, enhance, or what have you, those require a visit to the doctor and a prescription. So the idea that people could be dosing themselves with hormones, outside of any kind of advice from a medical practitioner, and also, again, not know it. I mean, it seems absolutely crazy. But yeah, so I wanted to, as my final question, you mentioned that you had been contacted by one reader who, made the comment about the sort of dangers of formaldehyde. What are some other reactions you've been getting?
I had about maybe 600 comments on the online version of the story, and most of them were sharing their relaxer stories and sharing about, sitting in salon chairs or at kitchen tables, having their hair relaxed and not knowing that this was a problem. I had a little shade thrown out, people not reading the story very closely, and then saying, I don't understand why Black women, just stop relaxing your hair. Just don't use that. And it's like, well, actually, read the story and you can see why there was confusion. I also noticed one of my old former Essence colleagues responding to some of the people who were saying wrong things, as I did. But I got a lot of comments, mostly people sharing their stories of relaxing, their having their hair relaxed beginning in childhood. And, I think about that. And what makes me upset is that our family members were trying to do something out of love and concern and worry about our futures, trying to make us look, whether it was through heat or through, relaxer products using chemicals, or trying to make us have a brighter future, not knowing because it's an unregulated industry that they could be causing us harm. And I think ways that one of the things that happening now are the lawsuits against the companies. And you were talking about many of these companies started out as being small, black owned. We created this product in our kitchen out back, and then they got bought by a L'Oreal or a Revlon or some of the bigger companies. And now there's over 8,000 lawsuits to say you there was an association that you did not share with the public and people got ill. So I think between the regulation, the lawsuits, the raised awareness, and the continued science, we're moving in a positive direction to getting a bit more oversight over what's in the products we use as Black women.
Well, hey, thanks so much for coming on to Shoresides and talking about this with our audience. It's been really eye-opening, and thanks for your time so much. I know you've got a lot going on. And yes, thank you.
Thank you. Nice talking to you. And thank you for your really incisive questions and sharing your own personal experience.
This concludes our episode. Thanks for joining us. We hope you gained a deeper understanding of the challenges and triumphs experienced by the vibrance of our communities. Remember, the stories we explore here shape the path ahead. Thanks for listening, and you can learn more about Shoresides at www.shoresides.org. I'm Ren Smith. Again, thanks for listening.
With itching and flakes, the medicated has got what it takes. When I want my look to say, all right, a cornrow is really out of sight. Comb Easy makes it a breeze to comb through and braid with natural ease. And spray